Hello and welcome once again to another exciting episode of the Law Gallery, coming to you from the Lagos studios of KAFTAN Television. And as you know, as always, I always have interesting packages, interesting focal points lined up for your watching delight. Now today we have another interesting topic to discuss, and I don't do this always. I always have a legal practitioner with me whom I will be engaging in the discussion of property law today. As you know, we've always had cases of the government either seizing property or demolishing properties, and usually it causes a lot of rancor. It causes questions, just like the one we had recently at Ajao Estate in Lagos, Nigeria, when the Lagos state government demolished some particular properties. Therefore, today we are joined by Esquire Adebisi Samson Spencer. Did I pronounce those correctly?
That's very correct.
Yes. So we are joined by Adebisi Spencer Esquire, whom will be engaging in the discussion. But before we go into the discussion, let's take our news updates on the program for today. We'll be right back.
Hello and welcome to the news update on the Law Gallery. My name is Esther Agbo. On the news today, Ms. Dorothy Huford, SAN, of the International Chamber of Commerce, ICC, Nigeria Commission on Arbitration and Alternative Dispute Resolution, ADR, has ordered the international community to make Nigeria a seat of arbitration. She announced her charges at a press conference ahead of the ICC's 7th African Conference on International Arbitration. Huford called on the international community to appoint Nigerians as arbitrators and advisors and to make Nigeria the preferred seat of international arbitration. Speech at the next conference on international arbitration and ADR, Africa's Journey So Far and Beyond. The conference brought together legal experts, business leaders, policymakers, and experts to discuss the development of international arbitration and ADR in Africa. He emphasized that it was the best event to promote. The ICC International Court of Arbitration Centenary Conference will be held from 31st May to 2nd June 2023 at Eco Hotel and Suites, Victoria Island, Lagos. The conference will be hosted by the ICC Nigerian Arbitration and ADR Commission in collaboration with the ICC International Court of Arbitration in Paris and the Nigerian Bar Association (NBA), and will begin with a training session. She said the conference will cover all sectors, especially business, oil and gas, telecommunications, shipping, banking, and event sports. Police Deputy Chief Jerry Ogunshakin was indicted in the Lagos Federal Court on charges of illegal pay court of 128 million naira. Defendants face 3 counts of conspiracy obtained through misrepresentation and illegal diversion by Special Fraud Unit. Police Prosecutor Chukwu Agu told Judge Chukwujeku Aneke that the defendants committed the crime on November 15, 2022. He said the defendants Ogbu Patricia, aka Ramba, Michael Babatunde, aka Oria, Boraj Shobande, aka Onifade, Peter Ben, and Idris Wada, aka Koka, conspired with each other, all of who are on the run. Prosecutors said in court that the defendants colluded with others to fraudulently receive 128 million naira from businessman named Esomonu Everest under the guise of selling US dollars. Ogushakin was also accused of modifying the 128 million naira for personal use. According to Agu, the offense violated Section 8A and Section 13A and Section 15A of the Advanced Payments Fraud and Other Fraud-Related Crimes Act number 14-2, be punished under B. Money Laundering Prohibition Act 2011, amended 2012. However, the police officer pleaded not guilty to the charges. Following the acquittal, The prosecutor requested a hearing and ordered the court to remand the defendants pending judgment on the charges. His attorney, Cole Bello, did not deny the prosecution's claim. As a result, Judge Aneke ordered the defendants to be placed in pretrial detention at the Nigerian Correctional Center and stayed the case until July 19th. In early February, police indicted 4 men in court of criminal charges. The 4 are Ibikunle Wasiu, John Babatunde, Taiwo Michael Fagbain, and John aka Pius Irabo. Moving on to the next news, a civic group Save Nigerian movement said the entry requirements and process for granting permanent residency and Nigerian citizenship to foreigners could only be reviewed through a constitutional amendment. The group therefore called on the responsible state agency to reconsider this when the next constitutional amendment is made. In a statement recently released in Abuja and signed by its convener, Reverend Solomon Shemaka, the group responded to reports that the Nigerian federal government has introduced the brown card as a document granting permanent residency and citizenship to foreigners. One of the reasons given by former Interior Minister Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola as a reason for introducing the brown card is that, as in countries such as the United States, a 15-year waiting period for foreigners as a criterion for entry into citizenship is required. This is to shorten the period to 5 years. In response, Shemaka said, in his May 27th speech on granting citizenship to foreigners, the Home Secretary acknowledged that only a constitutional amendment can change the eligibility criteria for obtaining Nigeria's citizenship. Therefore, any statement at this point that does not take into account constitutional amendment is merely a wish. Meanwhile, the groups also said that launching a parallel program to compete with existing programs would compromise the already fragile security situation in the country and the threat of security from foreign entering the country with ulterior motives undermining the country's security regime. Moving on to the next, expert says that lawyers must adapt to the rapidly changing world of legal practice or they will be left behind. When they do this, they don't have to worry about artificial intelligence taking over their job. That was the key message of the 5th Business of Law Conference hosted by legal training and legal services provider Strictly Law Business. As with previous years, the event allowed lawyers to discuss how they are responding to a changing profession, the increasing demand of technological advances and rising client expectations. This year's theme was Legal Services in a Rapidly Changing World. The conference was chaired by Bloomgate's Solicitors Partner, Ceci Hunde. He welcomed both physical and virtual attendees and encouraged them to prepare for a great time and networking opportunities. The keynote was delivered by Simon Scopa Partners, managing his partner Dakbo Akishun SAN, and Mark A. Cohen, founder of the Digital Legal Exchange. It had 3 panel discussions, each with subtopics. Subtopics for the first panel discussion include: the keynote was delivered by Simon Scopa Partners, managing his partner Dakbo Akishun SAN, and Mark A. Cohen, founder of the Digital Legal Exchange. He had 3 panel discussions, each with subtopics. Akishun SAN highlighted the key services provided by its lawyers, including representation of individuals in and out of court. We facilitate transactions, draft and analyze contracts, and help resolve legal issues that arise in business. In his opinion, as the world changes, more and more fields of activity are emerging, such as technology law, which did not exist 30 years ago. At the time, you were either a litigation attorney or a business attorney, and in the meantime, many new areas of expertise have emerged. And that's all we have for you on the news today. Till next time, I remain Esther Agbo.
Welcome back to the program. It's still the Law Gallery coming to you from the Lagos studios of KAFTAN Television. And as I promised before we went on the break, I promised that we'll be engaging in the discussion of property law. So let's just do that right now. How are you, sir?
I'm very fine, thank you.
Thank you for being on the program with us today.
The pleasure is mine.
Yes. Now, let's just delve into the discussion. A lot of people don't even know about property law. Fine, we understand the fact that, okay, there is the law, and the law actually, touches a lot of aspects of the human existence, the criminal law, the intellectual law, intellectual property, and all. Now, can you please introduce us to what's the whole idea of property law and, some basic concepts?
All right, thank you very much. Like you've rightfully said, that there is, for every aspect and area of life, there is a law that is guiding and regulating it.
Such.
And as it relates to property law, there are the laws that regulate and guide the transfer of interest in land or landed properties, as the case might be, talking about buildings now, or the laws that guide erection and building and construction of such properties and its appurtenances. We call it appurtenances, things that are within and around it.
So generally, even while I was, picking this particular discussion, what came to my mind immediately was, okay, this is probably the aspect of the law that deals with land acquisition. That was the first thing that came to my mind, because the whole idea of having a property first boils to land acquisition, and it's such a complex concept, whereby you have someone who has actually acquired a property, and maybe after 5 years, someone would just tell you, okay, you just built a land on the Lagos State government's property, or they would just tell you, okay, this land belongs to this particular family, and you have been duped. Let's just say that, you understand? Yes. Now, land acquisition, are there particular legal requirements? Are there particular things to watch out for? Are there particular moves to make ahead of land acquisition? Let's pick it from there.
Yes, most certainly. And you see, this is the mistake that most people make. And I would take a good example with myself. Okay. Before I was called into the legal profession, my parents also had to experience things like that. And after I got into the legal profession, I was like, I wish I had known this earlier. Probably my parents would have gone through all of these things. But the most important thing, there's something we call search. There's something we call search, property search. Before you actually acquire a property, a land, you must make sure that you do your diligent search. And this is what most people fail to do. Now, when you want to do this, it is expected that you go through the right channels and the authorities that are in charge of land acquisition in whichever state you find yourself in Nigeria. So, for example, you have to get a qualified personnel in place of a lawyer, you understand, to do the search at the Surveyor General's office. That is to check if the land mass, the size, the location, and all of that. You have to get, you have to go to the High Court, okay, to check if the land in question is in dispute. Okay. If you understand. You can also go to the land registry to see if the land is free from government acquisition. So all of those things are a prerequisite before acquiring a land. So
do you perhaps know the particular agency that one can actually, go to? If we're taking peradventure, I want to, acquire a land, do I come to my legal personnel first, or I go to perhaps the building control agency, or maybe there's a land acquisition agency in Lagos State that we can actually go to? Is there something like that?
Now, the thing is, for ease, convenience, and area of expertise, it is always best that it should be left in the hands of a professional. And by professional, I mean a legal practitioner who is more experienced in that area. You understand? So it is something I do very well personally. Always ensure that before a client acquires a land, we do the check on their behalf, and at the end of the day, we have a comprehensive report as regards everything we've we've gone out to research, and then we'll give them a report. So with this, they can actually decide if they want to go ahead with the acquisition or not.
So recently I was on the social media space, and you know, I saw a particular story. Someone was narrating an experience where he wants to acquire a land, and the requirements brought in. First, they said they would do a background check. They're going to check his LinkedIn account, his you know, just a lot of things to check. Is that actually legal? Is that something to do just for land acquisition? This is not probably somebody trying to, you know, lease the property, just wants to acquire it, but they still want to do a lot of background check. Is that actually legal, and is it something to actually encourage?
Actually, I wouldn't say this is sounding strange, because there is actually nothing new under the sun. But then it is not actually right that you do a background check on such a person, even into their personal information. You understand? When it's not as though the person is coming to rent an apartment from you, so it's really not. It's not cool at all. It's not done anywhere. Yes.
And I've also seen a situation. I think it was actually a colleague. She wanted to, you know, rent an apartment, and the landlord actually said, "Okay, I don't give my apartment to certain people. Perhaps I don't give my apartment to journalists. I don't give my apartment to doctors."
Like that.
What do you think could be the reason for this?
Well, I would say that individual preference, yes. And I think was it 2 years ago there was this law went out to do with cyber crime and all of that, when started saying landlords who do not find out about, who do not inquire about the source of income, source of living of their tenants, and then they find out that they are into internet fraud and all of that, that they would be held liable for such. So I think this in recent time has actually prompted this kind of questions. But anything, I personally feel that if it does not have to do with the illegality of the person's source of income and living, you shouldn't discriminate. That is discrimination, and it's against our fundamental human right.
All right, so let's talk about survey, because that seems to be one of the basic concepts of land acquisition and all. How can someone who probably acquired a land or is thinking of acquiring a land, first, what comes first? Is it land acquisition before survey, or survey before land acquisition? Because looking at the whole idea of surveying, perhaps they will check the water level and all. How does that work?
All right, I think personally, and only from experience, especially if the land you're acquiring has to really do with a large sum of money, and then the kind of thing you're going to be using it for, the purpose for which you're acquiring the land, if you know it's something that is of great magnitude, you don't want to dabble or just act carelessly with that. So it is even much more better, because at the point where you're going to acquire the land, you will ask for the documents they have to the land, amongst which you have the survey plan. You understand? So it is just it is wise. It's a wise thing to do, that you pick up the survey document that is handed to you at the point of the contracting of the acquisition. Get your own surveyor, who is a professional, to check for you. That is part of the background check we're talking about. Then if it ascertains that it is okay, you can go ahead.
Now, is there a way that the surveyor overlaps the legal practitioner? How do you both work together? How do you balance it out? Because I understand that being a surveyor is one thing entirely, being a legal practitioner is one thing entirely. You understand? Perhaps even being a property, legal person. How do you both manage working together? Is there different places where you both come in, or you both work hand in hand at the same time?
Okay, when it regards to the issue of land acquisition and proper documentation, the two professions work hand in hand. Yes, because usually and most of the times where a case of dispute arises, you know, the lawyer would represent the client. Meanwhile, they would also need a surveyor to stand in as a witness, to give his professional you know, guiding as regards the survey on the land. So you see, we cannot actually put both aside. So we work hand in hand. So I would just conclude by saying that there is none that is above the other, especially when there is dispute matters.
Now, we've seen cases of houses being, let's say, property, uncompleted buildings actually collapsing. We have different building property collapse happening in Lagos. Who do we blame? Is it perhaps the construction agency? Or because I understand that, okay, there are building control agencies, government building control agencies that perhaps do, you know, check of whatever is being constructed. And there are always, how do I say this? There are always suggestions, okay, let me just say suggestions or commands always given out, okay, on this particular property, we don't want you to build more than 5 floors or perhaps 2 floors. But then, sometimes people go beyond what has been recommended. What happens at that situation? Is it that the control agency do not have total control? Or is it usually, don't take this as if I'm attacking you, is it the legal practitioner who is, you know, perhaps creating loopholes? Because I've come to think of it, I don't know who to blame. Is it the contractor? Is it the landowner? Is it the control agency? The discussion arises a lot of time, and I would just like to, you know, hear your own opinion. Okay,
I'll be very, very factual about this. You know, there has been a lot of debates on this particular issue, talking about, you know, it is one thing to have a law regulating something, and it's another thing for you to have enforcement.
Okay.
So I think in this aspect, what we really lack is enforcement of these laws, because it is expected that after a landowner gives out this job to a building contractor, he is an expert. He is in the best position to advise the landowner or the project owner on what exactly should be used, what exactly should be put in place, and all of that. So now he also is expected to know the permits, the authorities that are involved in all of this. So if at the point, I usually tell clients that make sure that you have an agreement between yourself and your contractor, your building contractor, and even as the building development is going on, you review this contract agreement, so that by the time it happens, the liability will not be on you as the owner of that project, but rather on the builder, who is considered an expert. I hope you understand. Yes. So now when things like this happen, and it seems as though those who are supposed to be held liable are not held liable, it will all boil down to the fact that there is no proper enforcement.
Now, what could be some of the legal implications of failing to comply to these regulations?
Okay, oftentimes we've seen on the streets, on building sites, where you see marks boldly imprinted on the building that stop work, remove, and all of that. Basically, when building contractors fail to comply with the plans that is approved by the physical planning authority in Lagos. Let me take Lagos as a case study.
Yes.
They have every right. They have every right to put a hold on that building. They have every right to ask that the building be brought down. You understand? So if these things can be enforced, like I said, we wouldn't have issues. But so many times, you know, the system is just so pitiable. And the system itself is not helping matters to make this enforcement very rigid. I believe if it's made very rigid, I read it somewhere sometimes that if the license of building contractors can be seized, you know, to make all of them stand on that. So it is part of these issues we have.
Now, is there a possibility of petition? Taking for an example, the the case of Ajao Estate, where the Lagos State government demolished some particular property. Can people actually petition such?
Yes, you see, we have 3 types of persons that can come into your property. Number 1, we have your invitees. These are people who invite yourself. Number 2, we have trespassers. Number 3, we have your guests, like they are working for you. You understand? Now, in the case where somebody comes into your property and then there is an accident, in that case, the first thing we consider is, was it foreseeable by the owner of this property? If it's a case of an accident that was foreseeable and it's something that he could have done everything possibly to make sure that it is averted, then the liability cannot be on the owner. But when it is not foreseeable, when it is foreseeable rather, this thing is something you could have avoided by just putting maybe a sign, or you cover the space and all of that, or probably even in an uncompleted site collapsing like you just said, the builder or the owner, as the case might be, would be held liable.
So you mentioned that we could have an invitee, a trespasser,
Yes.
and perhaps those who work for you.
Yes, yes.
Who is considered to be the trespasser?
Okay, let's say trespasser is someone who is on your property at a particular time without your approval. They could be there before with your approval, but you see, at the point where your approval ceases, they become a trespasser. So that is that on that end. Or people would even come without your approval at all. Take for instance a thief. That is a very common one. Someone who is just there out of their own free will without your approval.
So what are some of the legal requirements for land acquisition? Fine, I want to acquire a land, and I have my legal practitioner, I have a surveyor. Are there legal actions I need to take first? What are the legal requirements? Are there things I need to have, perhaps apart from the money? Are there legal actions I need to take, and are there legal requirements, things that I need to have as a person?
Yes, very well. You know, oftentimes I used to tell people that whatever is worth doing is worth doing well. If you want to acquire land, especially in a place like Lagos State, you must make sure that you carry out your due diligence, and this is what we lawyers advise. At the point of acquisition of such land, we prepare a document called deed of assignment that confers the rights and interest of the seller on the buyer completely. And it's expected that he should have an uninterrupted, undisturbed enjoyment of rights to that land. You understand? After this is done, it is expected of the buyer, it is no longer on the seller now, the onus is no longer on the seller now to do the rest. It is now on the buyer to make sure that for all of these documents, they are registered. They are registered. If it is not registered, then you cannot get, for instance, the certificate of ownership, CFO, the governor's consent, a registered survey plan, and the rest of it. So legally, after a lawyer helps you prepare a deed of assignment, we also help our clients to go through these processes of making sure that we register these other approvals from the authority. You understand? Thank you.
So I would like us to talk about the scenario I painted just before we started the program, but I would, spell it out all over again. Now, I have seen a case where tenants of a property are instructed by the landlord to pay land use charge. First of all, the land use charge is a huge backlog from perhaps 2-3 years before the tenants actually got into the particular property. However, the landlord enforced that first they have to pay the backlog, even though they were not living in that particular apartment at the time, and they still have to subsequently keep paying the land use charge. Now, first thing, land use charge, is it the duty of the tenants to pay such, or is it the duty of the landlord? First, let's pick it from there.
All right. When it comes to payment of charges, there are some charges that accrue that are to be made to be paid by the landlord, whereas there are some that are meant to be paid by the tenant. For example, there are charges that have to do with direct things that are used directly by the tenants and not the landlord, especially within the confines of the apartment with which they are using. These are directly on the tenants. But whichever one that has to do with the house generally, the house is owned by the landlord, and with time, the tenant is definitely going to move out. So it is not expected, it is not done anywhere that the tenants would be made to pay for such fee or charges on behalf of the landlord. Except, I used to tell people, this is why it is very important that you take seriously the issue of agreement. When you're signing an agreement, you take it very, very seriously. You don't just flip through and just close it. Because when it is inculcated in the agreement and then you sign, some landlords might want to capitalize on it that you are aware, you are informed, you understand. But ordinarily, it shouldn't be. The land use charge shouldn't be. It's not on the tenant at all.
Now, we've also seen cases of where perhaps someone is, seeking an apartment and they have to pay huge amounts to agents. These agents, they help you search for, houses, and sometimes you don't even like the ones they bring, but either way, you still have to pay. What is the legal place? What is the legality of, these agents and what they do?
All right, you see, this particular question is something I can relate to, because I can remember that the last time I got an apartment, I was so frustrated that day. I was like, why is it like this? It's not supposed to be. I mean, even we as lawyers, whenever it has to do with property rights and the rest of it, when we are charging, we charge, the standard charges is 10% of the actual amount. But when it is going beyond, it's running into millions of naira and all of that, there might be some form of consideration. You understand? So when the charge for agents and all of that is running into close to the amount you're renting the house, it is too exorbitant. But now the problem stems from the fact that these agents don't have, in quotes, they don't have a regulating body. They don't have like an association that it can be reported to. I see some of them say you're not a registered agent. I wonder where this is coming from. Because even you that you're claiming to be a registered agent, we don't see your ID card, anything to identify. So it's just like they are working on their own, and so they can do things the way they like. And I would implore that the government, probably in the housing area, should look into regulating this person, because really, especially in Lagos State, it's making life difficult for people who are in search of houses.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I saw a video on social media, a video of a place where an apartment. Now, this is my apartment, and another apartment beside that person's own, they're probably doing construction, and a pipe was passed in from one apartment through the other apartment to another apartment. What can such tenants do in such situation? Does such tenants say no to that? Or is it just whatever comes, goes?
They are both in the same compound or something? Same
compound. Let's say, take for an example, 3 apartments together, and they are trying to pass a pipe from one to the other. Now, the pipe had to go through the apartment in the middle, clearly exposed. What can the tenants do in such situation? Because obviously, the landlord could argue that we need to pass this pipe. But the tenant too also has the right to say, I don't want this pipe to go through my apartment because I don't want water having to move through my room or my sitting room. So what can be done in such situation?
All right,
and who is on their right?
Who is on their right? Okay. You see, the tenant, as at the point where they got into the apartment, they enjoy the right to quiet use of the property. That is the house now. So you cannot enforce such on the tenant. Rather, in a place where there is a mutual agreement or on the level of understanding, it can't be done. If this thing is for the benefit of the other tenants, and where they've tried to explore other options, like you said, the pipe, they've tried to explore other options and it's not working. If there's a mutual understanding between the other tenants, of course they can go ahead, but the landlord cannot enforce such on the tenant, because it is passing through his apartment and he has a right to enjoy peaceful use of the apartment. Yes.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate how you've been able to do justice to all of my questions, and I'm sure that our audience actually enjoys the session. Can we have like a parting shot? What do you have to say to Nigerians? What do you have to say to Lagosians concerning property acquisition, perhaps leasing of property or even buying? What advice do you have for us? All right,
like I said, I mentioned earlier, I said whatever is worth doing well.
Yes.
Now, I've encountered, during my years of experience in the legal field, I've experienced and encountered people, and I keep saying that it is evil. Landlords that are watching right now, it is, I'm taking this person about, landlords who are watching it is evil for you to actually charge house rent from a tenant. You charge agreement and commission from a tenant, whereas it is an understandable fact that the agreement charge goes to the lawyer who prepares the agreement, the tenancy agreement between the tenant and the landlord. Now, some tenants, funnily enough, they will take both their rent. They will be the one to take both the agreement. You understand? Then they just go somewhere. Some don't even give them agreement. What's it called? Tenancy agreement. They don't give the tenants tenancy agreement. Then when you now have disputes, okay, you want to recover your premises, and you start running around to get a lawyer to come help you fix the mess that you've already created. It is very, very wrong. You need to stop it. Do things the way it should be done. This money will finish you. This money will finish. And then for those of us that are acquiring land too, I would strongly advise. I can remember, if I can take say a minute of our time, I can remember a time when I had these clients from the United States wanted to acquire a land worth over 12 million and 40 million naira here in Nigeria. Then I advised him as his lawyer that let me go for a legal research and all of that, and he said okay. I charged him for it, and after I came back with the reports and everything, and then I gave him, he was like, is this all? Like you can imagine, so like, is this all? I'd be like, if this, luckily enough, unfortunately for him, it was because this land was free of government acquisition and encumbrances. That is, it's not like the government was going to snatch the land or it was having any issue or anything. But what if it had? He would have been on the safer side. That would have just called him so that don't buy this land. So please, for those of us who are having plans to acquire lands or any property, make sure that you do your due diligence and search.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate that. All right, that's it. Do your proper research. Anytime you want to acquire a land, perhaps you're even leasing a property, for anything you're going to do, try to do your research. If you acquire a land, do your proper survey. Have a legal practitioner who would do research ahead for you. And if by adventure you already have a land, perhaps one that was inherited from your family, try to do the survey. Have a legal practitioner who would help you research into such land if they're actually, usable, and if you're not probably encroaching on the government's land. And that's all we have for you on the program today. To return same time, same station next week. Khalid, Bada is my name. Bye for now.